Hey guys, I'm Fancy,
Hey everyone, it's me, Pink Hat Sarah.
and you're watching The Good Wives. And we are back again with a brand new Rise in Crime. So grab your cup of Joe and let's dish some true crime. All right. Well, that is our brand new opener for Rise in Crime. I think it's super cute. And it allows you guys, it talks to you guys about our Buy Me a Cup of Coffee. It's just one of the ways that you can support us. There's several different ways. We've got all kinds of things that you can do. You can join our Patreon club. You can buy some merchandise. You can, donate through Buy Me a Cup of Coffee. And all of that goes to helping us, the content creators that bring content to you guys at the Good Wives every single day. So, today we've got two different things to discuss today. I had planned on doing Crystal Rogers today, so I'm going to give you guys an introduction to that. But I really wanted to start today with a conversation um, about Quiet on the Set and what is going on and what has gone on with with these kids in Hollywood. And I watched it last night and the night before with my daughter, Abby, who grew up watching these shows.
And if you're not familiar, I know a lot of people have asked, what is Quiet on the Set? Quiet on the
Mhm.
Set is a documentary that has been released regarding the underbelly of the criminal activity and the exploitation of children within the Nickelodeon network.
Right. And I'm sure there's going to be some that come out from Disney soon too, because I have personal experience in this area, especially with this specific person that has been, named in and convicted. He's one of the only ones that was convicted, and that's Brian Peck. So if you know anything about me, I started in the industry. I kind of started at 18 in Hollywood, but I'd been on stage my whole life. And I'd always told my mom this is what I wanted to do with my life. And my mother had always told me that one, I needed to go to college to have something to fall back on. And two, I could do it when I was an adult. And I always was really upset with my mother for that because we lived right there. And so when I get to Hollywood and I signed up with Central Casting and I ended up getting cast as a series regular background actor on Boy Meets World. So instead of having to call in every week like you do as a regular person working for Central Casting, you call into a hotline, you see who's casting for the day or the week, and if you fit any of the descriptions and things, then you can call in and get booked. But what happened was I ended up. Oh, oh, I can't mute you, Sarah. You'll have to mute. I ended up on Boy Meets World, and I ended up, befriending the one of the PAs on there, and she was super sweet. And then she put in a request for me to be able to come back every week because they wanted consistency on their show. And I was actually in the older children. So the oldest son is Will Friedle. It's played by Will Friedle, and his name is Eric. And he had like a high school that he would go to, So I was in his classrooms when he was being filmed in the school. And so I played, it's called 18 to Look Younger. I was over the age of 18, but I still looked like a high school student. And so I had personal experience on that set. And it wasn't until I started watching Quiet on the Set. And then they talked in the last episode. So there's 4 episodes where they kind of go into what happened to Amanda Bynes, what happened to Drake Bell, all of those different things. And it got to the very last episode, And I kept looking at Brian Peck, who is the pickle boy, who ended up doing 16 months for sexual assault of a minor, um, and many other different charges. He pled guilty to 2 of 11 different charges. Uh, and I kept looking at him thinking, man, that guy looks familiar. And then they mentioned that there were 41 different members of the industry, highly respected members of the industry, big freaking names that wrote 41 letters to the judge in this case for Brian Peck, asking for either leniency or him to just get probation. And these letters are shocking. And I'm sitting here thinking, how are they justifying this? And then they hit me with one more thing, and it's two people that I Will Friedle and Ryder Strong, both from Boy Meets World, and I knew them very, very well. You know, I knew Ryder when he was a younger kid, as well as Ben Savage and Danielle Feischl. And so I went to see what their letters were because I was so upset. And I wrote a blog post about this. It's over on the goodwivesnetwork.com, about these letters and this case. And to say that last night reading those letters was heartbreaking is an understatement. I called Sarah in tears, because here's these two people that I know pretty well, and I'm thinking about, did I know this guy? Did I ever see him on set? And started thinking, I was like, I do remember that guy. I do. I remember him wearing the Hawaiian shirts. I remember him being loud and obnoxious. And I remember thinking, I don't like that guy. Something's not right about that guy. My like little spidey senses went off, and I was like, oh, alert, bad dude, And so I just always avoided him, and I always did my best to, anytime I was on set, I always tried to take care of the younger kids and make sure that they were all, taken care of, because on a set, a lot of times it is the other people around them that help these kids along. It's not just their parents; it's the whole crew takes them on, as under their wing, kind of. And so I remember, talking with Ben, talking with Ryder, talking with Danielle. And in fact, there is even a time I had these two little girls that lived next door to me, and they were like 11 and 13, and they were both in love with both the boys on Boy Meets World. And so I brought them to a taping and let them go down a meat grinder again and all of that. And so I'm like, God, I could have exposed those kids to that guy. And I just reading these letters. Oh my God. Sarah, have you read any of the letters yet? Sarah, are you there?
Love with both the boys on Boy Meets World. And so I brought them to a taping and let them go.
No. I'm sorry, guys. Technical difficulties. Sarah, you'll have to mute whatever platform you're listening on it, so that way we don't hear it in the background and we can hear you. Can you do
Yeah, I've got it. I can't hear you right now in the studio. So I was trying. It's fair. No, not really. But it's just I think in the studio because on YouTube you're coming in loud and clear.
Okay. Well, I don't know why you can't hear me. It's so weird. Um, have you had a chance to read any of the letters that were sent by these 41 people?
I did go through the ones that they had listed in the documentary, um,
Mm-hmm.
and went through them because I thought it was really important that it was noted, that these letters of recommendation had been sealed, and these investigative journalists were seeking out the truth, and they filed over and over with the judge and the court system to unseal these letters and expose the 41 people plus that wrote these letters. And these people did not think that their letters of recommendation were ever going to be seen.
Yeah.
And now they're all out there.
Yeah. And these are big names. Like the ones that I saw last night were Alan Thicke, James Marsden, Joanna Kearns, Ryder Strong, Will Friedle, um, and there were a couple others. I saw someone's TMZ is where I saw a bunch of them. But yeah, they didn't think that they were going to ever release those. They didn't think that. And the documentarians are actually who went and got them. They had to petition the court to get them unsealed. And I'm wondering, I would think that Drake Bell would have had to sign off for that, since he was a minor when it happened. That's why they were sealed. But this was so you know, I wrote about in my blog that I remember when Nickelodeon was asking for the kids to do the feet pics. And my daughter came to me and she was, Abigail is 21 now. So, probably 11 to 13 she was when this was going on. And I remember her asking me, "Hey mom, can I take a picture of my feet and put it on social media and send it to Nickelodeon?" I was like, "Absolutely not." Like, no, that's weird. Why do they want feet pics?
Yeah.
And it struck me really oddly. I couldn't figure it out, but I wasn't a big fan of Nickelodeon shows anyway. I did not like them. I felt like they were trashy and too advanced for kids, and there was no educational value in them whatsoever. So I just didn't let my kids watch them very much. If she watched iCarly, that was she could watch iCarly. I did not let her watch Sam and Cat, and because I just did not feel comfortable with the way that they portrayed Ariana's character. It just was, there was something just off about it. And now that I watched the documentary and see some of the scenes, I was absolutely right in making sure that my kid did not watch that. But there were many times she was watching our Carly that I would tell her to turn it off because I didn't like the subject of that episode. Um, and this feet thing, it's got me really perplexed because I thought originally it was like they were sending them into the network, but what I found was a tweet about, post them to your social media and we'll follow to our fingers fall off. So here they've got thousands, maybe even millions of kids on social media taking feet pics, putting Sam and Cat on the bottom of their foot and posting this for people to follow them. Well, who's following them? Is it the stars? Is it Dan Schneider? Is it PEDOs? Like, this did not feel right to me. You know what I mean?
Right. And one thing I just blew me away is when they showed the with Ariana Grande when they showed her with the potato scene. That was
Oh, yes.
disgusting.
Disgusting. And the other thing that stood out to me was, with Pickle Boy, who's the one, Brian Peck, who gets, arrested, put in jail for 16 months for assaulting Drake Bell, and I'm thinking they were showing a picture of him with like the glory hole and
Yes.
putting a pickle through it. And here's Ray Romano on the other side grabbing the pickle. I'm like, all right, here we go. And this is a guy who says he likes to squeeze and torture pickles. What the fuck does that even mean?
I mean, it's 100% symbolism. You've got the potato, you've got the pickle, the glory hole, and I mean, if people haven't seen the Ariana Grande, basically she's given a large raw potato, and it's definitely she's saying how she wants to get like the potato juice out. So it honestly looks as if she is, I don't know what I can say on here, but as if she's jacking this potato off so she can get the potato juice, and then she sprays herself with water everywhere.
Oh,
They
that one
were
where she's like leaning back like this and it's going all over her. Is that
Yes,
what you're talking about?
yes,
Yes.
that I mean, if you can't see the symbolism there, they're throwing it right in your face. And they made
Yeah.
lots of references like that.
You know, it's so blatant now that I cannot believe that nobody saw it before. Like, and like I said, back in the day, I really thought this is not right. Something is not right. I just didn't like the shows. Like, I think that Amanda Bynes was incredibly talented. She had amazing comedic timing for, especially for a child to be that aware and that talented and so intuitive of what was funny and what made people laugh. And she started on stand up at 9 years old, and one of the other girls was on the show who introduced all of them to her, and she says, I feel responsible because I'm who did it. But my daughter pointed out that the girl was like smiling while she's saying that, and she was like, and then I was out, and it was like almost as if it reminded me of like how they groom a kid to then go get other kids. And I feel
Right.
like it's almost that situation. And she was, I think when she was smiling and talking about it, she was very uncomfortable, but it was almost like that, to the point of like she set up Amanda to be the next one that they were going to abuse, and
Amanda is insanely talented. And if we go back now and they're pulling up all of her old tweets from when she was writing under, her alias name, and everything that she has said about Dan and what was happening in the industry, she was telling the truth the whole time.
right. Right. And so were so many other kids that were trying. In the blog that I wrote, I was writing about the fact that this is not an isolated incident. This is not new. Okay? This is the child stars for all time have all been severely abused by people in the industry that were supposed to protect them and have their best interests at heart. If you go all the way back to like Shirley Temple, Mickey Rooney, Judy Garland, Drew Barrymore, the Coreys. This is nothing new, and people have been trying to warn people about this since I remember in the 80s. It came out about the Corey Haim and Corey Feldman, and we watched Drew Barrymore become, at 11 years old, 13 years old, I think 13, by 13 years old, Drew Barrymore had already been to rehab and was part of Nancy Reagan's DARE program, and say no, stop, say just say no to drugs program. That's what it was. Nancy Reagan's just say no to drugs program. And I'm thinking that's 13 years old. And Drew's mom was the one who was dragging her around to Studio 54 and promoting her to drink, do drugs, and dance with older men. So this
At
is
the
not
age of
new.
8. At the age of
At the
8.
age of 8, she calls herself she labeled herself as a party girl at 8 years old. That's disturbing. And I don't know why it's taken so long for it to become so public. But going back to Drake, and he's a 15-year-old boy, and one of the last things his father said to his mom before he gave up managing Drake was never leave him alone with Brian Peck or Dan Schneider. And then the very next thing she does is makes it so that Brian is taking him to all of his auditions and being with him on set. Because what? Because she's just too lazy to do it. She didn't feel like going in and doing it that day. Then you shouldn't be doing it because you are the only defense your child has. You just served him up to a pedophile, ma'am. And he tried to tell people, he tried to tell his mom, like, I don't want to be around him, I don't want to do this. But he said there was always some excuse, of, and so he starts spending the night over there. Like, what mother thinks this is okay? I
Well,
just
like he
don't
said,
understand.
it took his girlfriend, his first, girlfriend's mother, like he said, all of about 4 minutes to figure out
Right.
something was wrong.
Well, yeah, because he was calling her house, harassing them, trying to get Drake to answer the phone because he wasn't answering his own phone. So then he starts calling the girlfriend's house, and it's not like, oh, he called and said, hey, is Drake there? I need to talk to him for a minute. No, he was obsessively calling over and over and over and over again until the young girl's mother pulls Drake aside and says to him, what is going on? And he tried to give her, the song and dance story. Oh, we were supposed to go to Disney today and I don't really feel like going. And she's like, nah, what is actually going on. And so he finally confesses to her and he tells her what happened. And, I believe the documentary said that's when she alerted, I'm sorry, I'm having some itches. She alerted his mom, and his mom then alerts the authorities. So two strangers come in, sit down with him, and this 15-year-old boy has to describe in excruciating detail every event, everything that ever happened. He can't be generalizing like, okay, so some of it happened, before, now it's still happening. No, he had to discuss every single thing and tell them every excruciating detail. And this is a 15-year-old kid. Now it's hard enough for grown adults that have been sexually assaulted to come forward. Can you imagine this poor 15-year-old kid? So here he is. They arrest Brian Peck. They prosecute Brian Peck. And on the day of sentencing, it was him, his mother, and his brother. And I don't know if his dad was there at that point, but it was very small on one side for supporting him. And on the other side was all these celebrities that had shown up to support Brian Peck. And he literally stood up and told them that, you are supporting an abuser, and you guys can go home and do that, but I will never forget that you've all stood here and supported this man, knowing what you know today. It's one thing that they wrote the letters, but then they all came to the fucking courthouse. And these people still associate with this man, knowing this. And all of them were blaming the child. Oh, well, he must have been tempted. It must be a case of a good guy slipping. That was one of the quotes. There's no malice in his heart. I'm sure he's going to be, I assure you he'll never do this again. I assure you he's suffered. Somebody said he had suffered the suffering of 100 men for the last year. Excuse me? Excuse me. Are we serious?
It's infuriating because at that point in time, they all knew who the victim's true identity was. He had been listed, for people that may not know this case, he was listed as John Doe because these incidences that they were charging Peck with occurred when he was a minor, and they were trying to protect his identity. And so for many years, people did not know that it was Drake. But at the point in time when they were writing these letters of recommendation, and they did show up to the courthouse to support Peck, they knew that Drake was the victim. He was the John
At
Doe.
that
And that makes
right,
it even harder to
right,
swallow.
right. At that point, the day of the hearing, they finally know who is John Doe Child One, and they didn't know. I don't think they knew when they wrote the letters, because they were all writing it as if like this must be some one-off thing where some kid, tempted him, and the one guy even said he must have been worn down to do this. Like a 15-year-old is wearing down a grown-ass man to
And
do
it
this.
wasn't just, I mean, not only did he groom Drake, he was absolutely obsessed and in love with Drake. And it is important to note that Peck does identify as being homosexual. So, he was, besides grooming him, being obsessed with him, I mean, he literally followed him on his concert tours from city to city. I mean, he just was not going to let this kid go.
No, he wasn't. And even his co-star, like Josh Peck, who's not related, he came out in support of Brian, and it was a rift between Drake and Josh, and Drake even has spoken out about what Ryder Strong and Will Friedle said. And they have since done a podcast. They've got Pod Meets World or whatever, with it's Will Friedle, Ryder Strong, and Danielle Fleischel. And they did an episode on February 19th addressing this. They talk a lot about grooming. They have a therapist on with them. And they do talk about the fact that he was always hanging around them. Danielle says she went out to lunch with him a couple of times, but only when somebody else invited her. But she never saw anything inappropriate because that wasn't his, that's not his demographic. It's not his type. she wasn't what he was looking for. But Ryder and Will were, and they do remember, that there was, I think Ryder, I think it's Ryder who was talking. I wasn't paying full attention because I was just looking for a clip to look at and listen to what they were saying. But they were talking about how there had been three different guys in their circle, grown men, who acted like they were teenagers, who played video games and laughed and joked with them, and these people had extreme impact on their lives. Ryder especially, he talked about it a lot. And so it, to me, this was what he was always doing. He was always grooming these kids, and he groomed those two specifically, Will and Ryder, who even talked about they'd been friends with him after he was convicted. They'd been at his house. Da da da. Will even took him. Was it Will or Ryder? I think Ryder. Ryder brought Peck onto three other projects with him because he respected him so much. But then think about that entire time he's grooming them to think he's this nice guy, this great guy. So when the whole thing with Drake came out, of course they were going to go ahead and write him a letter. That how could they not? That, well, of course Brian's a great guy. This must be a mistake. This kid must be lying. Something must be wrong here. There's no way Brian would do this. And it's just, to me, the betrayal that Drake must have felt and still feels today has got to be huge.
Yeah, I mean, this was not just a one-time thing either. This was something that had been going on for years. It wasn't oops, I had an accident there, slipped up, lack of
Right.
judgment. No, this was something that went on for years. And as Drake says, when they asked him to discuss what happened to him, he just said, it's just so hard for him. It's just like, think of the worst possible sexual abuse that you could possibly imagine, and it just getting worse and worse. And circling back around to Peck, I mean, he even demanded that Drake had one of his birthday parties at his home. And, he had a room that was dedicated to like arcades and models and, all these like dorky, geeky things, but it was a way for him to relate to these kids. Then he had this Planet of the Apes room. And lo and behold, in the middle of that, we see a clown painting of John Wayne Gacy.
Oh my God, I know.
And
Oh my God.
that's a whole other dynamic there. And the picture was a self-portrait made by Gacy while he was in prison, because if you don't know, Gacy did sell a lot of art while he was in prison. But it is addressed, to Peck. And then they said later on, in a cabinet next to Peck's bed was a massively tall stack of letters between him and Gacy.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And it's just, you know, God, I'm looking at some of the comments, and people are saying, that Josh Peck didn't support Jeanette McCurdy when she came out either. No, and he was on a podcast with her, and he made fun of her, and basically she refused to talk about it at that point in time, and he was like, "Well, you owe us. What does she owe you? Like seriously, what does she owe you, Josh Peck? Like what?" And so now I guess I supposedly him and Drake Bell are now talking. He's apologized, but even like Kim had said earlier, that it came out that Drake says that they did know on a podcast the other day. He said they did know that it was him when they were writing those letters. And
Right. And
that's
Dan even reached out to him when the allegations and the arrest occurred, and he said, "Are you John Doe?" And he broke down and told him, "Yeah, it's me."
that's me. And then Dan tells him, "Oh, if you need anything from me, just let me know." Blah blah blah. And then Dan goes on to freaking do it to other kids. Like, and
Right.
then
He was just spinning damage control.
so then this guy, Brian Peck, he gets arrested. Jake Drake goes in court. All this happens. He gets a 16-month sentence. That's it. 16 months for everything he did, including hiring a child for, that's one of the charges. And then 1 year later, literally 1 year later, he does his 16 months, he gets out of prison. One, one, 1 year later, he shows up on Zach and Cody. Sweet Life. Those kids are 10 years old. And the way they justified it was, well, he's not around the children in a role that he can be leading the children. No, he's still there.
And he was also ordered by the judge to register as a sex offender. Why would they want a registered sex offender on their set?
Absolutely. I can't even imagine, and it just, it's so hard to think about, and it's like we've all known something wasn't right. I mean, you can't look at these shows and these kids and these teen actors over the centuries, over the decades, and not say, what the fuck is going on? Why is Brittany, so freaking gone that she's twirling in her freaking living room half naked all the time looking totally drunk? Why is Amanda Bynes lost her complete mind? Why is, the girl that played Kimberly on Different Strokes, why did she take her life? Why is Winona Ryder being arrested for shoplifting? The list goes on and on and on and on. And everybody was just like, well, blame the kids. Just blame the kids. They're bad kids. Nobody ever thought, hey, these adults are fucking these kids up. And all these
Right. I mean, and look at the suicide. I mean, and overdoses. Like Corey Haim.
Corey Haim, he took his life. I think that Heath Ledger probably had some of this stuff too, and he took his life.
We have River Phoenix.
River Phoenix, and the list just goes on. And the ones that are still standing are either completely jaded or completely Fruit Loops, like Amanda. Amanda is probably the only one who could probably still put Dan Schneider away, but she can't be trusted, because of everything that's happened to her. They basically gave her a chemical lobotomy by putting her in mental health institutions over and over and over and over and over again, to where she
I feel like Amanda, I mean, that is something I would really like to do, just something separate on her, because she was the first original whistleblower on Dan and what was going on, the evil things that were going on with Nickelodeon, and they just completely dismissed her. And now we see this downward spiral. And this is another note that I found very interesting, was that many of the child actors that were victims of assault and they were all encouraged and aided and helped by Dan Schneider and other high up executives to sue their parents for to be emancipated. And my question is, okay, so they're basically driving a wedge between the child and the child's family by convincing them, oh, you need to get emancipated. And I think that's a big deal right there, because that basically, after it was granted, that left the kids wide open.
Yeah. Well, it does a lot of things. Okay, so I don't know if you guys know anything about the emancipation. I did look into it when I was a teenager because I just wanted to be free from my mother at 16. I was tired. I couldn't deal with her anymore. My mother was, a juvenile diabetic on a lot of medication. She was highly abusive. And I love my mother dearly. And, she became my best friend later in life. But my mom was not somebody I wanted to live with. Well, my mother it was hard. She was on a lot of medications back then that made her crazy. So I looked into emancipation because I wanted to leave. I graduated at 17 years old. And a year before that, I was trying to leave my mom's house, like literally every fucking day. And so I looked into it. And one of the things that is why it's beneficial, yes, it is a grooming tactic. It is a tactic that the groomer, the abuser, is using to isolate them from the people who should be protecting and taking care of them. And it's psychological, it's physical, it's a tactic, and it is well known. Well, on top of that, what emancipation does is it now takes them out of child labor laws. So when they were having to, be able to go on set and they can only work for so many hours before they have to take a break, and then they can only work so many hours a day and so many hours a week. If these kids get emancipated, that no longer applies. So they can work them 12, 15, 16, 17 hours a day, and it doesn't matter. They don't have to give them the breaks that they get. They don't have to appear on set and go with a tutor. They don't have to do any of those things because they're now considered adults. And it kind of reminds me of what we've talked about in the Natalia case of them aging her up to 22 at 8 years old. Like, you're putting these kids into situations to be adults when they have no business being adults.
Right. It is 100%. I mean, it's the way it came off in the tabloids when, let's say, Amanda Bynes, when she filed for her emancipation, it was because she no longer wanted her parents to be her managers, and she was accusing them of stealing her money. And I do believe that they did, but,
A lot of people.
she was really one of the ones in that Nickelodeon group that set the tone for that. And then I believe with Drake, it was a way to keep him isolated and overworked and dependent on others because they had removed him from his parents,
And see,
assistance.
emancipating them is another way for people to get their money. Because, see, when you're a child actor, you get paid, you get the check, but a certain percentage, and I think it's really minimal, to be honest with you. You would think it would be more, but if I'm correct, I do believe it's a minimum of a 10% of that check has to be put into a trust for them when they turn 18 or 21 or whatever it is, and then the rest of it can be used, and it's supposed to be used to take care of the children, to provide all the different things for them, because the kids are earning their money. There's regulations on this and what can and cannot be done with this money, and what can and cannot be, and how much has to be saved and all these things. But when you emancipate them, that no longer holds true. And then their parents or their manager or Peck or anyone else has direct access to all their fucking money. It's
Exactly.
it's it's so layered. The way that they effed these kids over is so layered. Then Dan Schneider gets fired after all this, he gets fired and let go from Nickelodeon because more and more allegations are coming up. More and more things are starting to be weird. He's been sued by his female writers at this point. He's asking people on set to give him massages. That's inappropriate. And so a costume designer reported that. So at this point, he finally is asked to leave, and the reason they hadn't done it before is because he's making them freaking oodles of money. And so that's all they care about. They don't give a shit about these kids. They don't care about even good content. All they care about is the bottom fucking line. Do they fire him and tell him, "Hey, you don't get to work here anymore. You don't get to work anywhere in the industry not anymore"? No. Do what they do? They give him a $7 million freaking severance package. Here, Dan, we know that you're just a total shitbag and we don't want you around anymore, but hey, here's $7 million for you, buddy. Have a good one.
Was it 7 million or 70 million?
From what I remember, it was 7 million. That's what Kim put in the chat too. So 7 million.
It was still a lot.
Like back then, that's a lot of money. This was several. What was that? I think it was 2013, 2015, something like that. That's a lot of money. That's a lot of money.
And he was already a multimillionaire from his shows. And even once he received that severance package, it didn't stop him from remaining to work in the industry with children on other shows.
It also didn't stop him from claiming royalties on the shows. It also didn't stop him from getting back end deals on all the merch still, because he helped freaking do all that. This was a multi layered industry of how to just gaffle money. I mean,
Mm.
just a huge, huge money grab. And,
Right.
you
They
know, he
they
will,
didn't even really go into detail about, the merchandising, but you got to keep in mind, like, he was bringing in the TV ratings back then because Nickelodeon and Nick Jr. were on cable, and he was just keeping their ratings just higher than anyone else. So that's a ton of money that they're bringing in, but that doesn't even touch on the merchandise. I mean, how many t-shirts and pens and notebooks and outfits and even
socks and
wigs and just
backpacks and socks
it
and
it goes
keep going.
the list is endless. It's basically anything and everything you could possibly imagine. The DVDs, the VHS, the
Right.
videos, the merchandise that they were selling off of these shows was bringing in, probably billions of dollars.
Well, yeah, and then that's like what Kung Fu Panda just said. Even pre-emancipation, if the children are the breadwinners that support the entire family, parents look the other way. And the one boy, I can't think of his name right now. He was the African American boy, and that's what he was talking about in the documentary. He was saying he felt responsible for making sure that he could get his family out of the ghetto, and out of the projects, and he felt like he was getting closer and closer with that, but he was never the cool kid. He was not the favored child. So he was always fighting for a spot for his thing, and this is the kid that they freaking put in leotards and make dogs lip peanut butter off of him. Like, are we serious?
Right.
Who thought that was appropriate? They start a
And
fear factor with kids.
his mother was the only one that was raising hell with everybody about it.
Yeah.
And he kind of got blackballed because people didn't want to deal with his mother because she was exposing the truth. She was saying these scenes are inappropriate. They're you guys are taking this way too far.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they were
Anyway,
also skirting around, he mentions the child labor laws by keeping these kids on set for sometimes 24 hours.
hmm yeah. I mean, it just unbelievable. And so we're going to get into this a little more, as this unfolds. There's a new episode. Episode 5 is supposed to come out on April 7th. If you have not watched Quiet on the Set yet, I highly recommend watching it. It's a hard watch. I will not be, I'm telling you, it's a hard watch. It is. I had to stop many times. I had to take breaks. I had to assure that my daughter was not, traumatized, because this was very important to her. She wanted to watch this. She's the one who wants to talk about this case, and she's going to. She's going to join me and Sarah and talk about it, because this was her childhood. She's 21 years old.
Right. This
These are the
this
kids
story for
who,
you to cover is very interesting because it's a very important story to cover, um, and also you have the ability there to sit down and speak with your daughter now that she is an adult and get her perspective on what it was like to be a fan of this during her childhood. And then also, another important factor, I think, in covering this story for you is the fact that you were involved in the industry and you were actually, a regular member on Boy Meets World,
yes,
which Peck
I
was
was
there
also,
for, and you
I also
actually
did an
saw him
episode.
in person.
Well, yeah, and I also did an episode of Zoe 101 at one point. So I left the industry. I had my daughter in 96. And then when she was 6 is when we moved to Arizona. So during the period of time before my daughter, I was a series regular on Boy Meets World. And then I had my child, and then I would come back every once in a while, but it wasn't a way I could support the family, because now I had aged out of that, like, 18 to look younger. I mean, I still could pass that way, but it was getting harder at that point. And it was, even though I've always looked really young, I wasn't looking 13. I was looking more like a 17-year-old kid, and a lot of those shows didn't have kids that age yet. So I didn't get a lot of parts and things. I did like Spider-Man. But I remember doing Zoe 101, and I met Jamie Lynn Spears and her mother, and I can't stand her mom. I cannot stand that woman. If there was ever a stage mother of stage mothers, it is Jamie Lynn Spears and Britney Spears' mom. And she's a piece of shit, in my opinion. And like somebody just said, Kung Fu Panda said she doesn't understand how they can be put into a conservatorship like Amanda, like Brittany, and then still be required for being mentally ill, and then still be required to work like an indentured fucking servant. Britney's in a fucking conservatorship where they're taking all of her money, controlling anything and everything she freaking does, and yet they're toting her out to 3 and 4 shows a freaking week. How does that make any sense?
Right. Exactly. It
So
was
yes, I
they
was
were
on these
she was
shows,
there.
and I do remember him. I remember him being a weird, creepy guy that I always thought was weird and creepy. Like my sixth sense just went, he's not okay, And I do remember that. I do remember these kids. I was really close with the cast of Boy Meets World. Um, we were like a little family. I spent 3 days a week with them for 2 years. Because Wednesdays would usually be our rehearsal day. Then Thursday and Friday were taping days. I went out to lunches. I went to bars. I went out with the cast and the crew many times, many times. And I hung out with a lot of the crew members off of offset. You know, um, and I just think about that, and I'm like, God, I didn't even realize I was exposed to this, and these kids that I know are exposed to this. Meanwhile, I've got my kids watching these shows, growing up watching these shows, and it's just polarizing for me. Like, I, I wish I could have done something to protect them, including my own children who are affected by this. They didn't just groom those kids. They didn't just groom Ryder Strong and Drake Bell and Will Friedle and Amanda Bynes and, all the others. They didn't just groom them. They groomed our own fucking kids to accept softcore porn for children on TV. They talk about,
Right.
that one time when Amy Lynn Spears turns and she gets the shot right here and it's going down her fucking
Yes,
fist.
that's what I was
That
going to
woman
say.
called it a what shot? Yeah, a that shot.
Yes,
All
and that
the
was
adults knew exactly what the fuck it was,
what I
and
was
they
going to
made
bring
it
up
get
too was
worse.
that Dan was constantly trying to put that, shot into every episode that he could, the moneymaker shot. And it was so obvious to a lot of the adults there and the writers what he was doing. And he was pushing the envelope and putting the girls in skimpy bikinis, on iCarly. And it was just one
Well,
thing after another.
Amanda Bynes calling her whatever taint. And he literally is in the freaking writer's room telling them, I know what this means. This is what it means. It means the peace between the such and such and the such and such, but don't let anybody know that's what it really means. We're going to say that it means tainted. And the writers were like, oh, well, that's just Dan. That's just Dan. He's just a weird guy. That's just Dan. His humor's kind of off. He's just Dan. Nobody blinked a fucking eyelash. Just, yeah, that's fine. Yeah, that's fine. We're just gonna have the kids send in feet pics. No problem. That's just a
Well,
pedo fucking
everyone
paradise.
every writer and the costume person that decided to remain anonymous, every single one of these people said that, they were working in a extremely hostile work environment. Dan became very sadistic.
Yep. And if you crossed him, you'd never work again. Kind of like Harvey Weinstein in the Me
Yep.
Too movement. Those girls were all experienced extreme abuse at the hands of him because they didn't want to ruin their careers. And so these kids are making those same decisions. These are kids being put in these adult situations with these adult people, being groomed, being treated like this, being workhorses, sexually assaulted, all these different things. And here they are, just trying to navigate being 13 years old, and so they're going through all the emotions and all the different things, and no one is protecting them. No one. Not their parents, not their friends, not the set people, not the writers, not the producers, not the camera crew. No one is protecting the children. And meanwhile, our children are watching this unfold on TV, being groomed to think that a shot on the forehead, oh, that's funny. No, it's not funny. It's not funny.
Right. I mean, they even did the episode where they had the kids doing the shake weights. And, it's just basically we're watching children being victimized, and then our own children are watching it. And they're looking up to these kids, and they're innocent, and they don't realize that all of this stuff is very sexual in nature and very highly inappropriate. So now we have, you know, an entire generation that grew up on these shows, and I question as to like how warped did these shows cause them to be.
Right. Oh, and it's like I said, that was why I was so adamant about when I would walk by and see one I didn't like, I'd tell them, no, you're not watching that. And it's not just the Nickelodeon shows. It's a lot of shows. It's a lot of my daughter, even I were talking about even something as simple as Dora the Explorer that she was watching, and I wouldn't let her watch it because it was teaching them bad behavior of like screaming at the television, I can't hear you. Say it louder. I'm like, it's 8 o'clock in the morning. You are not saying it fucking louder. No, we are not watching this. And
Right.
she was like, but I think about these things. She goes, these shows, Mom, teach us bad behaviors. It teaches us to accept things we shouldn't accept. And it grooms us to be the people that we are today. And this generation, my daughter's generation of kids, they are some of the most messed up generation I've ever seen. They are so lost. They're lost. First of all, COVID hit during the time period that these kids are in their, a lot of these kids were 16 and 15, 16 years old. So they're taken out of school. They don't know all of this is happening to that generation of kids that's now coming into adulthood. And we're watching the impact that the school system had on them, that these shows had on them, that the different things that we were teaching the children at these times had on them. They're little sponges. And you can either fill the sponge with goodness or you can fill the sponge with badness. And my daughter was so affected by this. It's heartbreaking for her. She had a crush on Drake. She loves Zach and Cody. And there's even a shot I saw about Zach and Cody's mom saying that, during the period of time that they were on Sweet Life, which I don't know if Dan was on or if Brian Peck or Dan was on, but Brian Peck, if Brian Peck was on the set at this time, but she made a comment about how she was standing at the craft table and there were craft services, which is where you go to get food and snacks during the day or on sets, okay, and then they provide a whole meal. But craft services has got all the snacks. It's got cauliflower and fruits and candy and all the things. And I love craft services. Let me tell you, man, craft services is my favorite place to be on set. But there were donuts sitting there, and this was the time period that Cody and Zach were coming into puberty. So they were advancing at different speeds. And I can't remember which one of them put on more weight than the other, but one of them was a bit chubby and the other one was still very well fit. And he hadn't hit his, kind of spurt yet. He hadn't really shot up to kind of balance out the weight. And literally, someone came over, grabbed the freaking donuts off of the table, turned and looked at his Cody and Zach's mom and said, "No more sweets and craft services until he looks like him again."
Well,
Fat
they
shaming
can't.
him.
these children cannot, they have no control over their body, their growth spurts.
Well, that's like they told
And
that one little girl.
he did
Go
lean
ahead.
out after he hit his growth spurt.
Oh yeah. Well, the one little girl that was in the documentary, they told her, "Oh, we've already got a fat one. You can't be the fat one," because she was putting on some weight.
Right.
It's just, this is so astounding. So we'll be covering this a little bit more as we, as it unfolds. My daughter is going to be a guest. Sarah's going to interview her to talk about what her experience was, what she feels now, how she feels about this, and knowing that she was watching this happen to these kids and herself, and trying to figure out, you know, what what happened, what happened to these kids, and how do we make sure this never happens again? Never happens again. This is not
That
okay.
would
We
be,
cannot accept
you know, that
this.
there, sadly, you know, these people, society has only gotten worse. And we see that the children who are the most innocent and vulnerable members of our society are being victimized on a daily basis in and without the entertainment industry. And then within the entertainment industry, people are making so much money off of them hand over fist that it's very hard to see an end in sight.
Right. Well, okay, guys, you can go to my blog at thegoodwivesnetwork.com and read the blog that I posted last night. We'll be covering this some more, but I want to transition now into the case that I really wanted to talk about today, which is a local case to me. It's a Bardstown, Kentucky case, and it is the Crystal Rogers case, and it's currently in the court systems right now. And so I've put a link in our Patreon to all the different documents that I'm receiving from the courthouse. So I get them every time there's a motion, every time there's something that happens in this case. There are three defendants, and I get all of those things to put before you guys, so you guys can look and see what the court system is doing, and what's going on with this case with that. But let me get into it a little bit. I've got, I wrote down a whole thing to give you guys an overview of this. So I'm going to give you some background on the case. So on July 5th of 2015, Crystal Rogers was reported missing by her mother after she had not been seen or heard from her since the evening of July 3rd, 2015. The same day Rogers was reported missing, her car was found abandoned with a flat tire at mile marker 14 on the Bluegrass Parkway in Bardstown, Kentucky. Rogers' keys, phone, and purse were still inside her red Chevrolet Impala. Rogers is the mother of five children and is not known to go anywhere without her children. And her youngest child she shares with her ex, Brooks Hauk. Um, he was a local businessman and considered a good old boy. And the Hauk family has long been suspected in her disappearance. Evidence even points to Grandma Hauk helping her grandsons hide and tamper with evidence. So, Brooks Hauk, Roger's boyfriend, is charged with murder and tampering with physical evidence in her case. Two other men, Joseph and Stephen Lawson, are charged with conspiracy to commit murder and tampering with physical evidence. In September of 2015, Brooks's younger brother, Nick Hauk, was fired for tampering with evidence in the ongoing investigation into Crystal's disappearance. At this time, Nick still remains a free man, but it's looking like that could change any day as he is a suspect in the November 19th, 2016 murder of Roger's father, Tommy Ballard. Ballard was shot and killed on a family property near Bluegrass Parkway in Bardstown, Kentucky, in front of his grandson, who was a child. Just 3 months after Crystal's disappearance, law enforcement presumed her dead. And in August of 2016, the Nelson County Sheriff's Office, Jefferson County Sheriff's Office, FBI, and Louisville Metro Police Department searched 300 acres with at least 14 cadaver dogs. Snow said a crime involving Rogers is believed to have happened at the Hauk farm. So he's one of the men that was searching and talking about this. And then on November 19th, 2016, Tommy Ballard, Rogers' father, was shot in the chest and killed right as he was about to go hunting on family property in Nelson County with his young grandson. The FBI eventually calls his death a homicide. In April 2019, after being arrested for stealing more than 200 bundles of roofing shingles from Lowe's, Brooks Hauk was found not guilty. The trial was held in Bowling Green, and because Hauk's attorney argued they would not get an impartial jury in Nelson County. So then in August of 2020, the FBI took the lead in the Rogers case, dispatching 150 state and federal law enforcement officers to execute 9 federal search warrants. They searched Brooks Hauk's home, and members of the IRS left with dozens of boxes, 2 filing cabinets, and much more. And after a 7-day search of a Bardstown neighborhood in the case of Rogers' disappearance, FBI agents said multiple items of interest had been uncovered. These items were sent to the FBI lab in Quantico, Virginia, for forensic analysis. At this time, I actually went down to Bardstown when this was happening, and we went out to several of the big sites that they were digging up. We spoke to neighbors and townspeople, and we went out to the car's dump sites, and we looked at the place where even Officer Ellis, which is a suspected another murder connected to this, was murdered. It's suspected that Officer Ellis's murder and that of Crystal Rogers and Tommy Ballard are all connected. But we'll talk about Officer Ellis later in this series. There's a few other highly suspicious cases in the town that could all prove connected or just be one town with horrible luck. So on September 7th of 2023, Joseph Lawson, a 32-year-old Nelson County man, was charged with criminal conspiracy to commit murder and tampering with physical evidence in connection with Rogers' death. He pled not guilty in Nelson Circuit Court, and his bond was set at $500,000 in cash. We have heard the Lawson name connected to this before, but it wasn't Joseph. It was, I believe, his father, Stephen Lawson, which are both now, all three of them are charged. I find it super interesting, though, that Joseph was arrested first when we hadn't heard his name connected before. We'd heard Stevens. Um, Brooks Hauk was arrested on September 27th of 2023 after being charged with complicity to murder and tampering with physical evidence. Hauk was escorted into Nelson County Jail in handcuffs, and his bond was set at $10 million. So here's Steve Lawson. Steve Lawson, who talked with Brooks Hauk by phone the night after the disappearance of Crystal Rogers, has been indicted on charges of criminal conspiracy to commit murder and tampering with physical evidence in the Rogers case on December 8th of 2023. At the October bond hearing, Young told the judge his team was also investigating Ballard's death and believed they had the gun used to kill him. Quote, the firearm that we purchased from Nicholas Hauk, who was using a fake name when he sold the rifle, Young said, adding the caliber of the rifle matched the one that killed Tommy. There are 5 criteria that we are looking at, and so far it matched 4 of the 5 criteria. So in December, Special Prosecutor Shane Young wouldn't confirm the specific details of the newest search, but he said it is in connection to one of 3 unsolved cases: Crystal Rogers, her father Tommy Ballard, and former Bardstown officer Jason Ellis. Young is the special prosecutor in all 3 cases, and this search is what led to the arrests of the 3 men mentioned earlier, and I'm really hoping it's finally getting us closer to answers in this case, because this case has been going on forever with no answers, no nothing. You know, Sherry Ballard lost her daughter and her husband and got no justice, because this is another case of like a good old boy network, where they protect their people, and he was, well, he had contracts with law enforcement as a contractor, drawing up things, doing stuff for them. His brother's involved with law enforcement. He gets fired for tampering with evidence in this specific case, and nobody does anything. It took forever for us to get here. And it's been obvious to anybody who's been watching it exactly what happened, but we couldn't prove it. They didn't have enough information. It had all been buried and taken away. And her child was, four of the children went to be with Sherry, their grandmother, and then the child that was shared with Brooks Hauk, it's they took him away, and he's never seen his grandmother again. Like, it is rough on these children. In this case has twists and turns. And when we were out there, my husband and I were talking to different people in the community, and every single one of them said, "Oh, we know it's him. We know it's him." And we can't do anything. They couldn't do anything about it. And so it even still took them several years after the search to still finally charge someone, you know? And so they're both waiting trial right now. I think the next motion is in April. Um, but have you guys heard of this case? Do you have questions on this case? Sarah, have you looked at this case at all?
Um, I have a couple questions just because I am also new to this case.
Okay.
Um, was Crystal's body ever found?
Not that we know of. I The only reason I suspect that it could be a situation like that, and maybe we don't know, is because they keep talking about tampering with a body. And so I don't believe they ever found her body yet. They've not announced that they've found her body yet, but I'm wondering if they have, and they just haven't said. I don't know. I don't know. But
But
disappearing
they
within
do suspect foul play.
100% within 3 months. The law enforcement claimed that pronounced her dead. Yeah, 100%.
Wow. Even without
100%.
it's so hard to try and convict someone when there's no body.
No body, no crime. No body, no crime. And that's held up for a long time. I've seen cases more recently that they've gotten convictions with no body, but that's a really hard thing to prosecute. And prosecutors don't like taking on cases they don't win. They've got a track record they have to uphold so that they can advance in their careers. And so a lot of times things get not prosecuted because they don't think they can win. They don't have enough evidence. They don't have enough things. And
What was the
so
motive behind what was their motive behind her murder?
from what I know, they had an argument. They had an argument. I don't know if it's a crime of passion. I don't know if he'd been planning it for a while. I don't know. But they were having problems, and I believe that's what it was. I'll have to look it back up again. But I'm pretty sure it was just like an argument that they weren't getting along. Maybe she was going to leave him. I don't remember the exact details. I'll have to go back through all of that. I didn't look that up yet. Again, not that I didn't look it up the first time, but I'll put that in my next our next covering of this case, because this was kind of just like the timeline of events that I wanted to go through. This happened, this happened, this happened. Um, but this is going to be going through the courthouse. They did get a change of venue, and they got a change of venue to Oldham County, which is literally 15 minutes up the road from me. So when my car gets fixed, I'm hoping that I'll be able to have boots on the ground and be able to go to the courthouse and see some of the trial and broadcast that for you guys. But this is a local case, and it's been a case that I can tell you, anybody in Kentucky, we all know Crystal Rogers' case, and everybody knew. Everybody. I don't know a single person that was like, "Oh, we don't know who did it." Nope, nope. Everybody, everybody. Oh, it was Brooks. It was absolutely Brooks. And you get his brother fired years and years and years before for tampering with evidence in the case, but yet we don't get a conviction. We don't see an arrest. We don't see anything. It was a long time, and the FBI coming in, I don't know what they dug up because we've never been told yet, just key items of evidence. And they were like, so when we went down there, they were in a neighborhood, so there was a park that they tore up. um a park, like a weird, that's weird. But you got to remember, Brooks is a contractor, so he was building housing tracks in that area. He might have even built the park. I don't remember. I'll have to look and see if he did. But they dug out this big park, and it lines up against a graveyard, so there's the graveyard in the park. And then they were digging up literal neighborhoods, and I'm going to assume those are probably the neighborhoods that he built. Like there was just like gashes in people's yards, like big, huge, like takeouts of their yard gone, in the front yard and roped off and crime scene tape around it and stuff. I'm talking like big ditches. Um, and we taped that, but I can't seem to find the footage. It might be in my old phone. I did post it originally, some of it to our original TikTok, but you know what happened with that.
Yeah.
So,
Well, and this case is so bizarre and interesting because of the fact this isn't normal to have so many people die.
yeah. Well, Tommy, her father, was because there was nothing being done on his daughter's case. He felt that no one was listening, no one was helping. He was doing a private investigation of his own. He was trying to find out what happened to his daughter, which any parent would do. But Tommy was very, very active, very adamant about finding out what was wrong. And so it's believed that he was getting very, very close to the truth. And then they took him out. Then Officer Ellis, and I can't remember if Ellis was killed first or if he was killed after all of this, but Ellis, he was getting off and on off ramp, and it was the way he went home every night. So everybody knew that was the way he went home. And it was middle of the night. He came down the off ramp and around this corner. It's like at a really blind corner, so he could not see what was around that corner, and he was ambushed. And now they're saying that they think all three cases are connected. And then there's also a case of a mother and a daughter, a school teacher, that her daughter and her were both murdered. That was one of the cases I said could be connected, but we don't know. Um, that's one of the other cases that people talk about in connection with this. But so far, they have said that there is not a connection between these cases and the mother daughter case so far. So far. But they are listing that Tommy Ballard, Crystal Rogers, and Officer Ellis are connected. And there was, I think Ellis was getting close to something in his unit. I believe he was getting close to figuring out that there was inappropriate things going on. I know he was looking into some of the drug activities in the area and things like that, and they took him out. They took him out.
It's once again, we're dealing with just layers and layers from so many different individuals involved. It's a very complex case.
Yeah. Dawn said, okay, he was killed after. Dawn said Jason had gotten out of his car to move a tree branch or something that was in the road, blocking the road, and that's when they got him. Yeah. Um, and so I guess his death was after Crystal's and Tommy's, which means he was probably looking into this and got too close to some truth. And these are men and a network of men that will take you out in a second. We all have heard the good old boy network, and they band together, they do criminal activities under the long arm of the law, and everybody just sweeps it all under the rug when something like this happens. And that's what happened with Crystal for so long, but Tommy wouldn't let it die, and we kept hoping that the state police would find something, uncover something. They kept announcing, oh, we're doing this, we're searching there. Like I said, they searched with 14 cadaver dogs out on the farm property, and they felt like that was where she might have been killed and moved. And then, like I said, they start tearing up these neighborhoods that were relatively newer neighborhoods. So I'm assuming they're looking for where they buried the body, you know.
Very
But
strange that in all this time they have never found her body.
I don't think so. Not in Kentucky. I mean, he lives right up by the Lost River caves and the Mammoth Cave, and he could have easily taken her and dropped her out in a cave somewhere, or in the woods somewhere. Or there's so many hiding places here. There's just like in Ohio, there's a case where they think that a well was used and weapons and evidence were thrown down this well, and the same thing with like Susan Cox Powell. They've never found her body, and they believe that she's in a cave somewhere, or at the bottom of a well somewhere, or something like that. A hole somewhere.
And I feel so sad for her 5 children. that she left behind. And apparently, the son that she has with the ex, I mean, what is his deal? Is he taking the kid and gone into hiding?
No, I mean he's now in jail, but he has. I don't know if he married this. He married or has been with a long time the second girlfriend, and they call her Crystal 2.0 because I think her name is Crystal as well. And so that son is with her, and that's really the only mother he's ever known.
It's
So
tragic, and so this fifth child is now separated from his four other siblings, correct?
yes, yes, and he's not been able to see his mother since. I mean, his grandparents since. Okay, so Ellis was killed in 2013. So then that was beforehand. Okay, okay. I just trying to get the dates right because there's so many cases. It's hard to keep up with them. So Officer Evelis was supposedly killed in 2013. So I don't know what he was investigating, but I believe it was something to do with the Hauk family. Like I said, this is a family that runs that town. They've run that town for years and years, kind of like the Murdaws, running.
Right. They had 100 years of absolute complete power and control politically
Right.
and within the court system. I mean,
I mean,
there was no one that could go up against them.
right. Well, like the townspeople in Bardstown, when we were talking to them, they were very adamant that they believed it was Brooks' house, but nobody would speak out. They're all worried. They were very concerned because of the power that he has and his family has in this area. And it's very heartbreaking. I feel bad for the child, and then my heart just breaks for Sherry, her mother, who, she loses her daughter, she loses her grandchild, and then her husband is only trying to figure out what's wrong and what happened and who took their daughter, and he's shot right in front of one of his other grandsons. And they said, see, now they think they're saying that Brooks's brother Nick, the officer that was fired, they believe that he sold the gun to them, and they believe that he, being a trained, marksman, is likely the person who took the shot because it was a very clean shot through a wooded area, and it wasn't an easy shot to make.
So we're talking
And
about sniper level.
yes, yes, yep, yep. She has applied, Dawn, for custody of him, and she's been denied over and over again. She's even been denied now that he is in jail. So I'm hoping that once he gets convicted, maybe she'll get, this child back. But he was just a little kid. He was tiny, when this happened. And now he's probably what, a teenager or close to. So, but this poor kid, he's been ostracized from the whole family, and oh, this is a case that I've followed forever because it's literally 30 minutes away from me, you know? So, but I will make sure when we talk about Officer Ellis, I'll have more details about his case. I just threw him in because I knew that he had been connected. And then we'll be dealing with this case more in detail. If you go to our Patreon, there's a link to all of the different documents that the court has put out so far, the bond hearings, the evidentiary stuff that they've already put out, change of venues, all of that stuff. So I get them all the time, and every single time I get an update from the court or a motion filed or anything, I shove it in there so you guys can look at them and not have to, do the work yourselves. So, anyway, guys, I think that's pretty much all I wanted to talk about today. Thank you, Sarah, for joining me and hosting Rise in Crime.
No problem.
And
I've pretty much been having to read your lips almost the whole time because I have no volume here on this
I don't
link.
understand why it's doing that. That is so weird.
Yeah.
Guys, we just added brand new merchandise. You can buy it right here off of YouTube. There's a lot more for the YouTube parts. There's water bottles, caps, hats, shirts, all kinds of stuff. There's even bandanas for your dog, with Rising Crime on it. But we did just release a shirt a coffee mug, and a and another thing. What did I ask was the other thing? I don't remember what the other thing is.
Water
They're all up
bottles?
on our, no, not the water bottle. It was a cup, a coffee mug. No, okay, so a shirt and a coffee mug, and then our exclusive premium roasted coffee. We have several blends for you to choose from dark to medium to light to decaf. It is the Good Wives coffee, and right now we're running a special on it because I'm clearing out my old inventory to bring in new flavors and new options. So head on over there, hit the shop button, and go ahead and grab some coffee so you can have coffee with me and Sarah in the morning when we do our Rising Crimes. And, grab some merch and rep the brand for us. And every time you do, it helps us, take a picture, send it in. We are running some contests right now as well. So, our Patreon member club, if you are on the lowest level, any one of our levels, you can participate in the bingo, Gypsy bingo card. Okay, so fill your Gypsy bingo card out. It's a 2024 of Gypsy. What could possibly happen with Gypsy in 2024? Fill it out. Send it in to tipsforgoodwives@gmail.com, and you'll be entered into our monthly drawing for April. We've got a bunch of cool merchandise and prizes coming forward for you for that. And Sarah and I are working on something for Derby, hopefully. So, really excited about
Yes.
that. Um, we're going to have a little bit of a virtual event for sure, but we may, fingers crossed, we may actually get to have like a live in person thing if we get our credentials to be able to cover the Derby. So I'm super excited. I'm hoping that we get to do this. We tried to do a Derby party kind of last year and it fell apart. So I've already done a lot of the work. But we're really excited about this. The network is going to be coming back onto your TVs June, July-ish. We've got all new content creators. I'm really excited about the direction that we are taking right now. We are kind of stepping back from the Gypsy case while we write our books and our documentary. And hey, guys, cross your fingers. April 1st, we are hoping to drop our very first book, which is a companion to The Good Wife's Guide to True Crime Season 1, all about Gypsy. Colleen and I are putting our commentary as to each episode. So it's going to be a transcript of every episode that we had that you can read. And then it's also going to have extra bonus content in there that Colleen and I respond to each one of the episodes as to kind of what we're updating from 2019 to now. What are our thoughts and feelings today versus what they were in 2019? Because we've come a long way since 2019. My God. And so you guys can get that. Probably we're going to try and release it on Amazon on April 1st. Cross your fingers. We're editing it right now. Then we've got the
And
Good
also
Wife.
we are still continuing with the Natalia Grace story as well.
Right. Did you want to talk about that a little bit for at all? Just kind of give an experience. Talk a little bit about maybe your personal experience with it, so that they know that it's kind of like the Gypsy situation for me. Do you want to do that real quick?
Um, do you want me to go into detail about my personal experiences now or here, or should we save it for the
I just I just thought maybe you'd like to give them a little like snippet, of what you know
Okay,
about the
well,
Natalia Grace story.
basically, I mean, I became aware of the case very early on because like I said, my mother was an executive director and instructor at the University of Purdue in Muncie, Indiana. So I was, right there, and had family members even in the Lafayette area, which was extremely dangerous. And so I heard it was in the local news before it ever became national news. And it just, struck me as just being such a bizarre and twisted case. And I wanted to know, what was going to happen to this girl or young woman, as they had claimed. And, there's so many aspects to it as far as like the adoption industry. And that's something we want to cover, is kind of an expose on how disgusting this adoption, and it has become an industry, a money making industry for individuals where, they're just basically auctioning these kids off, and it's gross.
They're trafficking kids. Let's just call it what it is.
Yes,
They're trafficking kids. I
right.
mean, there's no other explanation. And then partner that with the fact that there are thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of kids going missing in the foster care system every effing day, where we don't know where they are. There's no record of what happened to them. They're just gone. Poof. Bye. Just
Yeah. And that's what
gone.
I said. Where are these children? Where are
It's kind
these
of like that
children
moment, where
going?
are the girls? Where are all
Yeah.
these children going? So we'll be covering Natalia Grace. Sarah had her own personal experience with the family
I
of
had,
Natalia
yeah, my
Grace.
personal experience began again after she was on Dr. Phil in 2019. But then again, like I said, everything did go quiet because of everyone having the gag order. And then I had reached out to the Mans. I was extremely supportive of them. I was in all of these Facebook groups and groups on social media defending them to the death and sticking up for them, helping them with their social media, because they wanted to set up, a Facebook page, and they wanted to set up a YouTube page, and they wanted to set up a TikTok page. And so I kind of helped guide them through that. And then when they set up their GoFundMe and their Amazon wish list, I helped rewrite the mission statement for the GoFundMe when it was originally set at 10,000, which of course they increased it to 20,000, and they did receive over 20,000. But then again, with the Amazon wish list, I would say they probably got, closer to 60,000 or more on the Amazon wish list. And I still continued, day and night to defend them. I thought they were being attacked and bullied for their religious beliefs, because I did grow up in the same religious background of being Pentecostal and apostolic. So I kind of knew the way that it operated. And then people were attacking them for basically adopting all of these children just to make money off of them. And I was just like, no, no, no. I mean, I have my own personal experience with adopting a child, and I only received a few payments, and I was only receiving $300 a month, which didn't even cover diapers and wipes. So I said, there's no way you can make a living off these children. But I was wrong. And I found out later on down the line what they were doing and how they were making money off these children, and how Natalia had become their cash cow, and how they're just grifters. Um,
That's what I was really
neither one of them were, other than Antoine, the self-proclaimed bishop, with his ministry. But and that's something to dive into, because it's leaning more towards a cult. And so I did speak with them on a regular basis, as well as Natalia, and was in with helping with their lives and things like that on TikTok. And I just started to see that there were some issues, that there were some problems, that things were just not adding up. Things were not making sense. And even though I had defended these people so deeply, I started to see that they had used me. And then when I was, not really confrontational, I just had let them know. I said, that I was very hurt. And instead of responding to that, they'd basically attacked me and said that, I had done nothing to help them. And I think really what was so infuriating for me was the fact that they were posting things on social media, and they were lying. They were 100% straight up lying about the situation with Natalia that they were currently in, because she had actually left their home the day before Christmas. And she's not spoken to any of them since then. But yet they still continue to post screenshots of them together, photos together, screenshots of them as if they were speaking in, a FaceTime, and posting it saying, we're still a family. She still loves us. There's no problems. And then I go back and find out later on that they're lying. They are absolutely lying.
Well, yeah, it's very similar to my case with Gypsy, but I feel like they've turned her into a grifter now. That they have taught
They
her the way
absolutely
to
have.
grift.
She's doing the exact same thing now that she was taught to do with
Yeah.
them. She has a GoFundMe up now, and she has received. Again, she started at 10 and then moved it to 20, and now she's continuing to move it and continuing to make more money. And she has an Amazon wish list that is getting bought out so fast. She has to add new things every day. And you have to keep in mind that all of these people received a significant amount of money to do the
Right.
documentary.
Yeah. Yeah. So we'll be covering
And,
Natalia more. What'd you say?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you. Can you speak up?
Oh, I just said we'll be covering Natalia more. I just wanted you to kind of share your little bit of an experience with them. And yes, guys, April 1st for the first book is very important. We cross your fingers, dot your I's, pray that it gets out in time because that is our beloved Christina's birthday. And so I can't think of any other better way to celebrate her birthday than to publish a book with her words, in her own words, in it. And Colleen and I are very, very excited about this book coming out. So we'll be talking about it more. Make sure that you like, follow, subscribe, and share. Follow us on all the socials. We're at Good Wives Net on almost everything. You can find me on TikTok at Spicy Red 92 for now.
Right.
That's our
And you
TikTok.
guys can find me on TikTok at Sadie Beth one. That's SADIEBETH1.
And then to join our Patreon member club, it's patreon.com, Good Wives Net, Good Wives Net. The $1 level is basically like where we drop all of our gossipy, juicy details about the 7 years of investigating this case. All of my screenshots and things like that are going in there. Our $5 level is the level that most everybody, is on. That's where we put the bulk of our information, all the inside documents of the cases that we investigate, anything, we do extra things in there for you guys, and we're working on building our Patreon back up to be much more interactive with our audience in there. And then if you're still wanting to see or support us in making the Gypsy documentary, if you want to see the medical records that we have put out that prove that she does in fact have a chromosome disorder, and so it proves that all of the things that she had done to her physically, medically, were necessary based on this chromosome disorder that Dee Dee had been telling everyone she had had her entire life. They just didn't know what one it was. So it's very interesting. It's over 240 pieces of medical records that help you understand how Colleen was able to interpret these medical records, these tests, and determine that Gypsy does have this chromosomal disorder, and it runs in the family on Rod's side. You can look at her, you can look at Mia, you can even look at his other daughter Nicolette, and they all have this kind of similar face. So if you're looking for updates or you just want to have a good place to support us, go ahead and support us over at Patreon or buy me a coffee at Good Wives Net. Thanks, guys, and have a wonderful day. We'll be back. Have a good one from the Good Wives, dishing up true
Thanks.
crime one
Thanks,
at a
everyone,
time.
so much for spending your time with us. And we look forward to seeing you guys soon. I hope you guys stay safe and you have a wonderful week.